no direction to move it forward.
Well, I wouldn't mind thinking about it a little bit first. Have there been any other cities that banned this kind of application come in that we know of, that anybody else knows of? Like, if an application is coming in, is there any other situations where a city in a similar situation has gotten itself into a legal bind?
I know I defer
In Washington.
to our staff here on this.
There have been several cities around the states in the adoption of Initiative 502 that have banned the operation of recreational and medical marijuana retail stores. There's been more than one that has been protested, and to the best of my knowledge, all of those cases that have gone to court have upheld the city's authority to ban retail sales.
So if I'm looking at council, and I don't see really the will of the council to move it forward to November 2016. So we'll just leave it at council's decision to keep it at 2017. Relative now, Mr. Davis, the second point, his public record request, I'm going to turn this over to you, the city manager, city attorney.
I'm not exactly sure what the precise question is, but the records request that was referenced materials that accompanied by the name of Strategies 360 that the city contracted with for the focus group process, and some of those records also included records by a sub-consultant that Strategies 360 hired called, I believe, Fieldwork Seattle. As far as I know, the city has made every reasonable effort that it can to request the records that we're talking about from Strategies and then the sub-consultant. And recently, the sub-consultant's legal counsel wrote a letter explaining in essence that the information sought in their view was not public records, was proprietary information that's owned by Fieldwork Seattle, and they declined to provide their records. Only short of perhaps the city filing a lawsuit seeking records would there be any chance of actually receiving them. So I believe the city has sent out a communication to those who made the request, Mr. Davis included, sharing that information and explaining that those particular records were not available. As far as I know, all the records that were requested were provided.
Thank you for that explanation. Now, then I'm going to bring up the other issue, which was from yes, yes, Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, exactly. You're listening to this discussion, it occurred to me that in the future we might want to consider if we're going to have this type of contract, that in terms of the Open Meetings Act that we stipulate in there, that this information might be made, can be requested, made available to the public. Because I presume the contract we have let them have the opportunity not to provide it, and maybe we should be more specific on language contract in the future.
As a matter of fact, the professional services agreements that the city enters into with consultants has beefed up language in that area as a result of the Cedar Grove compost case that's filed against another city. Transparency. The professional services agreement in this instance, I believe, was prior to the change in the agreement form. The current form has more beefed up language. That still doesn't mean that a sub-consultant can be forced to provide proprietary business-owned information without perhaps filing a lawsuit, and even if that were done, wouldn't guarantee an outcome that a judge would rule that the records are required to be produced by the sub-consultant.
Okay, well, I understand that. It's a hard time. That this is proprietary information. And I don't have that legal trap line that make the judges on it. Appreciate the comment.
Okay, good. So the next issue I'm going to bring up is that issue that we've heard from several people relative to reestablishing the deed restriction at the April Field. I want council to discuss this. Yes, Councilor Schlatt.
I think that it should be brought back as a discussion item to the council and to look at it and decide what we need to do. I think that it's timely to talk about. The committee has been meeting for a while now, and I think that we should have a direction that we're going on this.
So, yes, Councilman Randall.
Yes, I would agree with that too. And I know we talked about this a few months ago, that we could possibly make a decision on this issue sooner than some of the other issues around Halifax. So that is probably about the right time now to do that.
So we would be basically bringing it back to staff to schedule this discussion, but now let's hear from other council members. We have 2 council members who are in favor of this discussion again. The future other council members want to weigh in. Councilor Burke, I see shaking your desk. Councilor Hamilton.
Well, that's kind of, we discussed this in the past. And, I mean, I certainly looked at that deed restriction, and my interpretation of it would be we have to tear down the Boys and Girls Club. I'm happy to discuss it again. Council made a decision in the past to preserve this land as parkland and designate it for that specific purpose. And I think to that end, we've upheld the letter of the intent when this land was deeded to the city. And there seems to be a confusion in some people's minds that this was directly tied to the request for a cell tower. And there's an entirely different process that involved the cell tower. At that point in time, the applicant was entitled to make an application. And that application would proceed through a particular process. And at some point, that process might have been turned down. And at some point, that process may have come to the point where it would have been an action item by City Council. And my sense, I can't speak for anybody else, but we had already chosen to reserve this as parkland. And I don't think that this council would have authorized a cell tower in that location for that very reason, that we were looking at this, in my case, I can't speak for the other 6 members here, but we preserved this as parkland, and as stewards of that land, we would have continued to preserve it. And we certainly, and I wish the whole process had happened a little bit differently. I think if a request had come to this council about asking for the deed restriction to be lifted, I would have been in support of that. And I would be in support of that today. For the very reason that what happened, people were thinking 100 years ago, they were thinking about making this, we don't know exactly what they're thinking, other than the words of the deed restriction was, but they want to preserve this for the community. And this is a wonderful resource that we have. And I would think about utilizing that resource. If it's just play fields, you wind up making some really strong restrictions that doesn't put that land to good use for the recreational purposes that it was originally intended for. And that's why when I read it, I thought, oh God, we should go, if we want to restore it, we need to go tear down the Boys and Girls Club. Now, people might say, well, we don't want to do that. But critical thinking here is, what was the intent for this? It was for recreational for the community. And this council has chosen to make that preservation. And subsequently, I'm not in favor of bringing it back, but if you want to bring it back to the discussion, I'm fine with that too.
Let's wait willing to bring back for discussion in the future meeting?
Oh, I'm definitely willing, and we just need to finalize this so we can move on. I think it's taken a lot longer than it should have. I admit that I certainly was for a senior housing there for multiple reasons. You know, you can disagree with me all you want, but there's a lot of benefits to it that maybe you all don't quite realize. But I understand that it is for park use only, and I'm willing to support that 100%, and I just want to get this signed up so we can move forward. Thank you. And as much as a quick claim deed sounds like a great idea, I'm not willing to do that. I want to make sure we do our homework on this before we move forward. We don't handicap ourselves with not allowing something to happen in the future as a result of not looking into it more deeply. Thanks.
Councilman Rob, you okay with bringing it back for future discussion?
Yeah, I mean, we need to get this wrapped up pretty soon. You know, I'm a millennial, so we want things now. But at the same point, doing things correctly in the right way, making sure we have all the right information about it is probably the best thing, because, you know, 100 years from now, when people look back at it, we need to make sure we made the right decision this time, not look back and say, oh, they rushed that 100-year decision. So,
Right. The city manager and, you know, we would like to look at this at some point in time. And I think we ought to look at the whole site, because I know there's still some deed restrictions at the Halmo site, the northern side. So we need to be clear, I think, with our community about what those restrictions are, where they are, and look at the whole site, and then certainly talk about the reinstatement.
Yes, that's what the initial plan would be, to make all those needs consistent with each other.
That would be
rather than having separate language.
right. Yeah, Councilman Shalat, wants to say something.
I would just like to get it on the agenda as soon as possible. I know that staff has many things it's working on, but sooner the better.
Right, we're looking for a new planning director pretty soon. So, no.
We have in mind.
Okay. He's not here tonight.
This is central office.
Okay. So then, and before we go to that other issue where I'm going to accuse myself, Councilmember Rorschach, you had a couple of issues.
I did. I have two. The first I would like to bring up under new business pertains to the Parks Naming Committee. And I wrote a little thing down here, so I'll just read it verbatim. There are several parks up for either a new name or to be renamed. Now, with regards to Averill Field, I would like to see that park remain Averill Field. Averill, sorry, I'm not from Snohomish, but Averill Field was originally named after someone whom our city's residents respected immensely. A local sports hero that made it big. If I was in the Averill family, I would be pretty frustrated to hear of potential name change. Granted, what's that?
He's still in town. Sorry.
I'm not the guy I'm referring to, but he's passed away. Granted, how often are parks even called by their given name? I lived in Snohomish for almost 20 years and just recently learned Averill Field was original. The Averill Field was the original name. Like most folks I talk to, it's the spot next to the Boys and Girls Club. It's the skate park, or even that playground alongside Halmo. It's not known as Averill Field. But at one time, this area was the center of many city festivals, including our very own Klahaya Days organization. It is very clear that some things shouldn't change, and this is an easy one. So with that said, I move that the City Council first discuss and then adopt the request to remove Averill Field from the naming committee's list, and I apologize for butchering that.
So you made a motion to remove Averill Field from the list. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, is open to discussion.
Point of fact, the current official name is Averill Youth Complex. And the reason Averill Field was removed from that property was when the actual baseball field was relocated to Pilchuck Park.
Yes, so Pilchuck Park is now actually Averill Field. So you were aware of that, were you? So the Parks Naming Committee is working on that.
I think a number of folks are not sure what it's currently called. So what is the current name?
Call it the historic Averill Field.
No, I'm not speaking with you yet. Thank you.
The current name of the property is the Averill Youth Complex.
And Averill Field is at Pilchuck Park. Councilor Schley.
So I am on the Parks Naming Committee as the council representative, and as we've seen tonight, there's confusion. And so I don't think, I think there's a great misunderstanding that there's some desire to rename Averill Field. And I've known Averill Field for, I won't tell you how long because then you know how old I was. And because I lived here my whole life. So, but there's no plan to rename it, but I think we want to clean that up, right? And so I think, and Mr. Rottenberg brought up tonight that Ms. Johns had a really wonderful idea that there are many different entities at that location, and we would probably, perhaps the committee will come to the conclusion to identify them as the skate park at Averill Field. And I think we want to probably, it sounds like maybe the community will want to reclaim that name, Averill Field. I grew up knowing it as Averill Field. Janet, Averill Field? Yeah, everybody, I think that's what us old timers know it as. And so if we want to get, and someone brought up a really good point, you know, you want, if you make a 911 call there, you want to be able to identify that it's not at Pilchuck Park, that it's at, if you're at the skate park at Averill Field, it's, you know, so there's some benefit. So it's not to be renamed, it's to clean it up and to make it right. So I know that a lot of people feel a lot of angst around it being on this naming committee. It's not a renaming committee, it's a naming committee, and it's, so I think that people need to not get all upset about it, that it's more of a protection for Averill Field than it is anything else. And be part of the process. The public is welcome to come to that meeting and give their input and to be watchdogs over it, but not to, don't be fearful of it. It's not going to take the name away.
Is Councilman Randall?
Yes, and I moved to Snohomish about 35 years ago.